What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Ken of Fifth Angel. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here, man, with your new album, When Angels Kill. This is an absolutely kick ass album. Being that it was about, like 5, 6 years since the release of your last album, The Third Secret, was this meant to kind of just be a continuation of that from your 2018 release, or was When Angels Kill meant to be kind of like a new beginning for Fifth Angel?
Well, it's kind of a new beginning in terms of, this is a concept record, and I think it's unique in the fact that we looked at our body of work and we noticed there were a lot of common themes and things that we had been talking about even since we were teenagers, like terrorism and war and betrayal and all the deception in media. That's another one. So we noticed that there were kind of common themes, and we wove all of our sort of the material from the previous albums into a cohesive story that people can enjoy on the new record. So it was a little different. I mean, it is kind of like starting over a little bit. And it's also, I think, kind of like an exclamation point. Like, I think from this point forward, we're probably not going to write about the same subject matter because there are themes that have carried throughout our career, and that this sort of sums it all up into a story. But I think it's an entertaining story. I think it'll move people, and but to answer your question, yeah, it's sort of a newer beginning, I would say.
Yeah, you just opened up the hornet's nest of questions now, mentioning that this is a concept album, because I've always said that Fifth Angel's music is conceptual, and kind of like the religious versus spiritual argument. I always thought that there was a difference between something being a concept album and something being conceptual, and through the lyrical themes that are always demonstrated, from war to media and corruption and all that. First off, I don't think there's a better time to be a fan of Fifth Angel than now. But with the concept demonstrated, was this concept or this idea thought of before you guys even laid down a single note for the making of this album, or did this idea kind of just come as you were writing more and more material for this?
Well, that's a great question. We actually had been talking about it sort of not super seriously, but we were talking about it on Third Secret. We were talking about, well, maybe this should be a concept album. And then we just, never really followed through with it. And then when this one came about, like you said, it had been about 5 years, which, honestly, we didn't plan on. 2 years were really from COVID, got knocked out of there. So, we really feel like it's been 3 years since our last record. But yeah, I guess time-wise, it's been 5. So, once we decided, the first thing that happened is we did have a synopsis of the story, and it was about 3 or 4 pages long, and it was fairly complex. And I remember, this is kind of a funny story I've said in other interviews, but I sent it to the bass player John, who's also been there since the first record, and he got it and he said, "Do you have any other ideas?" This is really complicated. I don't know how you're ever going to get any of this stuff across on an album. And so, I kind of thought, yeah, it is. It's a lot of, it's a pretty deep story, and it is. There's a lot of things that happen, but I think we were successful in sort of morphing it and putting it into the musical. And it's almost like a movie. Like if you close your eyes and you listen to that record, and you listen to the lyrics, you can actually watch the movie in your head, which I think is really cool. And I think the cool thing about that is it's a little different. It'll be different for every person. Every person's going to have a little bit different vision of what it is they're saying. And so I always enjoyed that as a listener. Like a lot of times when you get older and you figure out, oh, those were actually the lyrics to the record. I always thought it was this. And sometimes I like my lyrics better.
Well,
So I think it'd be nice if people can listen to the record and see what it means to them. Like I don't want to say, we didn't want to get super dogmatic about saying this is what the story is. We kind of want people to listen to it, be moved by it, and then tell us what the story is.
Well, I mean, in the end, because like this is sometimes I thought of a Fifth Angel album to be sort of like shuffle friendly, where you can kind of like approach it from every single angle. But with this album, you need to open up with Descend into Darkness, and you need to end with Light the Skies, or maybe even the single edit for Resist Me. Who knows? But obviously, a concept album determines the lyrics. But did it also maybe guide your hand with how you wrote the music in a way? Did it alter the sound, or maybe give you a different technique on how you approach drums and the rhythm?
It didn't change my drumming technique, but it did definitely affect how we filled in the gaps on the songs. One of the first songs we wrote was "When Angels Kill," and one of the one of the next songs I think might have been "The End of Everything," which is really almost the end of the record. It was originally written to really be the end of the record, so it really helped us to have those bookmarkers and kind of go like, okay, well, we have this kind of song and this kind of song. Now we need to kind of fill in the rest. And this is going to be this part of the story, and this is going to be this part of the story, and this song will have this title, and this song will have this title. So it really, honestly, I think it actually assisted in the writing process. I think it made it easier, at least for me, to kind of envision, okay, what else do we need? What does it need to sound like? Is it a heavy song? Is it a light song? Is it a sad song? You know, what am I supposed to be feeling at this part of the story? And so I think it really did. I think it was really helpful.
When it comes to, and this could apply to any Fifth Angel album, not even just this one, but when you're writing about, war and like, the darkest aspects of the world, in a way, is there almost like research involved? Is there a lot of like looking at, articles or literature or film or visual art? Are you looking at other mediums as a means of inspiration, or is it more or less kind of like your own sort of vision and maybe like your own interpretation or your own response to the said situations?
Well, I think in this case, Fifth Angel has always been about writing songs about the state of mankind, which unfortunately hasn't changed much in the last 36 years.
I don't think it's changed since BC,
Yeah. And if you look through history, and that's actually a good point that you just made. You can go all the way back through history, and it's sad that we can talk about the same thing almost at any point in history, and technology will be different, but the story of mankind and how man reacts is probably going to be the same. And I think that's a little bit of a kind of the sad part of the story to some degree. It's if you look through world history, one of the things we've got "Resist the Tyrant" is one of the songs, and if you look through world history, it's always the same. There's been tons of tyrants throughout history. They want the same thing. Once they have all of the power and money that they can get their hands on, and they don't need that anymore, then they start making statues of themselves and books about themselves and sayings that they have, and they want everybody to learn it, so that they essentially want to be worshipped at some point. And that's never changed throughout history, whether it's Stalin or Hitler or Alexander the Great, anybody. You can go all through history, and everybody wants, once they reach a certain level, they want to be worshipped, which I think is really insane. I mean, it seems to me like to be one of those tyrants, you have to be like a complete narcissist. And, so it is interesting. We don't ever seem to run a shortage of those types of people.
Yeah, what's funny is I've always said that the people who want to be worshipped, and this is kind of pun somewhat intended, I called them master baiters, because they make love to themselves, but they're the master at baiting people into getting them to worship them. And it's also funny because Hypocrisy wrote about that on their last album, Worship. That was sort of like the whole meaning behind it. And you're totally right. Humanity hasn't changed. Sure, we have a lot more technology. We have this stuff now. But when you look at it, I'm pretty sure that cavemen, when the spear was first invented, they were like, oh man, you kids don't know the struggle of having to kill the meat with your bare hands, you kids and your spears. And like my favorite writer said when the book was first invented, people were probably saying, if it's not carved on stone, I'm not even going to read it. So like
I hadn't heard that one before. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, you should look up his book, Simon Van Boy, one of my personal favorite writers, and metalhead too. So
nice.
Yep. Why do you feel, because, and I don't like the whole genre labeling thing, but just for the lack of, to make the question, not extensively long, why do you feel that like the sort of power metal or the traditional metal style that you have was the best sort of type of music to express these sort of aspects of humanity, because Hypocrisy is a melodic death metal band, they sing about it. Ministry's industrial, they sing about it, you know. So like, why do you feel that like this style was always the best means to get your point across?
Well, I think for Fifth Angel, it's just a question of, as time has gone on, we do have our core fan base. And, one of the struggles we had back on Third Secret, not so much this time on When Angels Kill, but on Third Secret, is we were really trying to make something that still sounded like Fifth Angel, because we had all grown as musicians and we all were into maybe different styles of music and everything. And it really took a while for us to come upon the chemistry of actually being able to kind of create music in that vein once again. So this time we really didn't have that problem. So this time it was a little bit more fluid and a little bit more easy. But as far as I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Why do you feel like the style of music for Fifth Angel was the best means to get the point across?
Yeah, so the style of music, I mean, we wanted to be careful not to go so far in a different direction that people had no idea who we were or what we sounded like. And I think the one thing that we were successful in doing on this record and the previous records is making sure that we have those big choruses that identify Fifth Angel. There's a lot of bands that aren't super melodic. They don't have a singer anymore. It's more of just the screamo or, just the guttural kind of vocal. And that's totally cool. It's just not us. And so for us, we try to make sure that, that we retain that singable chorus. And when we played the Kit Festival in Germany, last month or whatever, I'd have to look. I think it was maybe a month and a half ago or whatever. But when we played that, it was really cool that, we've got thousands of people and we've got all these songs covering all these eras, and people are singing along to every single one of them. And that's for us. I mean, then we kind of know we hit the mark for Fifth Angel. So for this band, this brand, so to speak, we do feel that, like, you can't take it too far, otherwise it's not even going to be that band anymore. And so we wanted to be honoring of the original fans and honoring of what the band started as. So that's why we continue in the power metal genre.
And what I think it makes you stand out is that, most power metal bands are very fantasy driven. And that's not like a dig. I think what Twilight Force does with their style of power metal is excellent. And then, when you look at like Sabaton and how Sabaton brings historical elements into it. But I feel like with what Fifth Angel does is it's almost like a very modern representation. I feel like you're able to take every aspect of humanity and almost make it seem epic, or make it seem like the world that we live in cinematic. It's funny, when the world has clearly gone to shit the last couple of years with the pandemic and unrest and everything, I was listening to the Call of Duty soundtrack the whole time because it made like more of a movie-oriented reality. So I think the way that you do it, I think, makes you stand out in the realm of power metal. You don't need to sing about dragons or swords or, like ancient history. I think you're the most present power metal band.
Well, thank you, Alex. I mean, certainly those are kind words. And, in this particular story, we were actually writing for the future, and when we started it, we were thinking we were writing an album for, 100 years from now. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and everything was locked down. And all of a sudden, all of the governments of all the world were doing the exact same thing at the same time. And it kind of startled us. We were like, wow, maybe this album isn't that far in the future. Maybe it's coming up sooner than that.
I think the government got inspired by Fifth Angel. That's what I think happened.
I hope they don't. I hope they don't get inspired by Fifth Angel. It doesn't sound like a very pleasant place to.
It all makes sense. It all makes sense now. While Tipper Gore and all these politicians were blaming heavy metal for all the terrible shit, they were just using that as a distraction. They were listening to it, and they were getting inspired by it, and they were just using that as a cover. We all got it uncovered right now.
Yeah, now that's the truth right there. While they're saying, no, you guys can't do this, they're out there doing it.
Yeah.
So, hypocrisy. There's your hypocrisy for you.
Man, this interview is full of puns, and this interview is making way too much sense, and I love it. I love it.
We don't want to do that, so let's talk about something nonsensical. I'm just kidding.
Okay, let's talk about every other power metal band then, right? But One thing I've always wanted to know is because when you play this material live, this new album is a concept album, so therefore it's meant to be listened to in a specific fashion. But when you're playing live, people are going to want to hear stuff off of the self-titled debut or Time Will Tell, the Third Secret, and Now. So when you kind of shuffle around the set list a little bit and bring in different portions of your catalog, does that maybe add a different type of story behind it, or maybe kind of like shuffle the narrative in a way?
Well, one thing we haven't tried to do yet, but if you look at this album, and let's take, for instance, I have the vinyl right here, by the way. Here's the vinyl.
That is beautiful. I love the artwork on the album too, so to see that is just awesome.
But anyway, you could take a song like for instance, "Kill the Pain" is one of the songs, and it actually references back to a song, "Can You Hear Me" off of Third Secret, which is it's telling both sides of the story. In this case, the guy that had to leave his friend behind, to die, and the "Kill the Pain" is his side of the story. Can You Hear Me" is the friend's side, and that's from the last album. So we haven't tried assembling the whole story using the previous albums and this record, but it would be kind of fun to see if we could create like a live show that would tell the story and actually contain songs from all the albums. That would be really interesting to see if we could still do that. I just thought of it during this interview, but that would be a way to play the old songs but still tell the story of When Angels Kill. So we'll have to see if that's possible.
Well, I mean, this year does mark 40 years of Fifth Angel in a way. I know that the first album came out in '86, I believe, but this year does mark 40 years since the band's inception. So maybe we could get sort of some celebration about that. Maybe do a set where you do every song in the catalog.
That would be a very long set, but yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any plan for a celebration about that though, or is that really not on your minds with the release of this new
Well,
album?
we really haven't talked about it, but I think we certainly should. I mean, I think we should. It's funny that you're mentioning 40 years. I think it's really for us. Really, I think 84, 85 is where we're really thinking. So maybe at that point we'll have some sort of 40th anniversary celebration, or who knows, maybe put out a new song or something. And you just don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that you point that out. I didn't really even think of that. But yeah, from the band's start, it's been about 40 years.
Well, I do want to actually know because you released the self-titled debut in Time Will Tell in '89, and then we didn't get a new Fifth Angel album till 2018. So quite a long time. I mean, not to make you feel old, but the Third Secret was the first Fifth Angel album to come out in my lifetime. So just.
Right.
So, do you feel that maybe like the first two records and the Third Secret and When Angels Kill almost represent different eras or maybe different identities of Fifth Angel in a way? Is it almost kind of like two worlds colliding in one, or am I completely overthinking the hell out of it?
No, you're not actually. I think it is. I think it is very different. And obviously, we've had personnel changes over the years, and I think that that's another thing that kind of makes can make things like a new era, so to speak. But as far as this era, I mean that does surprise me though that this is the first. Third Secret was the first album that you heard as far as being alive on this planet. But yeah, it does make us feel a little bit old. But at the same time, it kind of makes us feel kind of cool because we were sort of forerunners at the whole power metal movement. I mean, really, I think Fifth Angel did actually influence a lot of bands. I've talked to some bands that are actually very successful currently. I don't want to name names or anything, but there are bands that were definitely influenced by what we did back then. And I think that's kind of a cool thing too. We've been around a long time. We try to retain our roots. We try to be true to ourselves. And but yes, I would say that that long gap in there, was really a lot of circumstances beyond our control. I mean, people don't, the grunge era. Are you familiar with that whole era?
I mean, it was sort of dying out when I was born, but the first era I remember as a small child was the alternative rock thing taking off. So it was like Smashing Pumpkins, Third Eye Blind, Everclear, and I love that shit as well. So yeah.
Yeah, there were some great songs in that era for sure. I mean, I remember when I heard Third Eye Blind, it was on MTV back in the day. And I remember it came on and I went, who is this? This is really cool. And I was enthralled by it. But but getting back to, why that, why this long, I mean, I guess you didn't really ask that question, but why this long gap and why a new era? Grunge sort of, which ironically was from Seattle as well, and we're from Seattle. And once that took off, it was a weird thing in the music business. Like the people that liked grunge made fun of bands like Iron Maiden and Kiss and Aerosmith, and like I knew them. I knew people that would just mock, these huge entities that now are, playing stadiums. And if you look at the grunge era, it lasted like 2-3 years. Most of the bands are gone, maybe with the exception of Pearl Jam. And I think whatever the attitude was that went with that whole thing, it just wasn't cool. I mean, it didn't play out that way in Europe. European fans were still very much into their metal, very much into the bands that they loved. But in the U.S., apparently, if you liked Nirvana, then everybody else sucked.
Well,
And
I,
was
ne-
that?
I never understood that. I had a conversation with Metal Church about this actually because in the end, like I love Alice in Chains and I love Soundgarden, and I mean
Yeah,
that's some
great.
fucking dark music there. You listen to Alice in Chains' Dirt. I mean, in some regards, I think that's heavier than maybe even like Load for Metallica at some moments. So like I never understood how grunge killed metal. I looked at it as more of a subgenre of metal in a way.
Well, it was weird. It was an attitude of the fans. I mean, you can find, footage of Alice in Chains singer mocking Dave Mustaine in Megadeth, and so there was this attitude like we're the new guys, f everybody else, and it spread to the fans, and we lost our record deal. I think the industry was really happy to just go, great, we'll just wipe out everybody else. And back in that day, there was no internet. Like nowadays, if you lost your record deal, you could still put out videos on YouTube. You could still put out singles on Spotify. You could still communicate with your fans via social media. But back then, if you didn't have a record label, you were kind of, you were completely off the grid. And so we lost our deal. And it's sort of, I think we may have been headed there anyways. I know Ted Pilot, went back to university. He kind of had to use, I think he may have had a scholarship or something he had to start using. So there were other factors that kind of happened in there at the same time, but one of the biggies was, we just didn't have a record deal at that point.
Well, I think, to quote, I forgot which member it was, but one of the guys from Slaughter, he said grunge didn't kill metal, people in the industry did. So,
I think it's a little of both. I just know, I had friends that were in that era and really loved that music, and I heard a lot of mocking of those kinds of bands, and what's funny to me is like, they're mocking, Iron Maiden and Kiss, two of the biggest, Coliseum acts of this era, bands that can actually play stadiums and draw, hundreds of thousands of people, and they're mocking them back then. And so I just think the whole thing was ridiculous. It was unfortunate timing for us and unfortunate timing for a lot of bands, but we all paid the price for a long time. I mean, it was, I ended up getting into production. I sort of left. I mean, there were other issues as well. I had some back issues and health problems. Like when I would sit down and play drums, I would have tremendous pain, and that was only able to alleviate that probably about the last 15 years or so, where I've been able to find my way around that. And but that was another problem. I mean, we had a number of problems, but certainly not having any type of machine to get us into record stores or onto radio or any of that, was a huge factor.
definitely, definitely. And I'm glad I didn't have to. I'm glad I didn't have to experience it, but I'm sorry you all had to deal with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I have a few more questions for you. I wanted to talk about your approach to drumming, actually, because I've had this discussion with a lot of people. Some people think that because drums aren't driven by melody, that it's not a very emotional instrument and it's just strictly technical. But I mean, I listened to the production and the percussion on this album, and it's really hard hitting and it's really inducing. And I spoke with Gene Hoglan a couple weeks ago, and being that he was always on concept albums with Death Clock and Fear Factory and Dark Angel, that drums are a very emotional driven instrument. Are you almost channeling your own personal energy into it, even though you're using external sources of inspiration for subject matter, your personal emotion is also being channeled into it?
Well, absolutely. I'm going to take it a little further, Alex. I'm going to tell you something very important in this interview.
All right.
This is, I've only said this in a couple of interviews, but I'm going to say it and then I'm going to back it up.
All right.
Drums are the coolest instrument known to man.
All
Period.
right. I hope Blabbermouth heard that.
They're very emotional. I mean, think of all the music. If you took drums, you took the beat out of rap. If you took the drums out of country, if you took the drums out of pop, if you took the drums out of metal, I mean, seriously, what would you have? I mean, it would not be the music that it is. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think drums are extremely critical. I think they're definitely where the energy, to a large degree on a record comes from. We notice it even when we write, and let's say we did a demo and there's a drum machine, which is playing stuff and it sounds like drums. But the minute you replace that with like a real drummer, like something happens. There's an energy that happens. There's an excitement that happens that you just can't capture. And same thing with even bass. Like I had some demos. I think Resist the Tyrant was a demo where I had everything down except John's bass. And, and the bass track was, it was correct and it was all there, but it's just, and it sounds like a guy picking a bass. But when John put his bass down on it, somehow it raised the energy level of the track. And it's the weirdest thing because it was playing the right part. It sounded like a bass, the keyboard bass. It sounded exactly like somebody picking a bass and everything. But once I had a real musician on there, it changed everything. So I do think drums are kind of critical, and I think it does lay the foundation. Sort of like if you're building a house, drums would be the foundation of the house. And when you're building an album, drums are basically the foundation of the album.
My dad, who's a musician and songwriter, has always said, if your drummer sucks, your band sucks. And I couldn't agree with that more. And it's very true. And let me just say, I've seen metal bands without guitars. And they pull it off great because they have a great drummer and a great piano player. This gothic metal band, I recommend you check them out, called Nefarian. It's a singer, a piano player, a drummer, and a bass player. And they make it work. The rhythm combined with their melody is very, very unique. But so like I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm a piano player at heart. I'm a very melody driven guy. But like I could picture a metal band without a guitar player, definitely without a singer now, thanks to Animals as leaders and whatnot. But like I can't picture any metal band at all without a drummer going absolutely fucking crazy behind that kid. Whether it's metalcore, power metal, thrash, death, black. It all needs a drummer going insane behind the kit.
Absolutely. It's just not the same music without it. So we're in agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in our local scene here in New York, we actually do have a National Hug a Drummer Day because most drummers, because I also have yet to meet one drummer who's in only one band and has only been in one band their entire journey. Yeah,
that wouldn't be me.
I don't think it would be anybody.
A lot of bands. So yeah, Alice Cooper, House of Lords, Flotsam and Jetsam, Accept. So I've played in a lot of different bands. But anyway, maybe it's one important thing to let your listeners know too that the Fifth Angel stuff. There is a lot of new metal. And, I think it's maybe important they know that it's not that, just so that they know, look, if you love power metal and if you love melody and you love, somebody singing and those kinds of things, this is your record. If you're into something completely different, maybe this is not your record. So, because, it's the weirdest thing to me that I'm noticing, on social media is people are, like we get so much love from our fans. There's a lot of love going on, but then there's these people that are just haters, man, and they're just like, what is this crap, and blah 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 blah. It's like they're just like laying all this hate out, and I'm just like, they obviously don't like this music, and I'm like, okay, well, you can listen to it for free on YouTube, and you're still going to complain about it. Like if you don't like it, that's fine. Go, why do you have to say something to us? Just don't like it and go listen to what you do like.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, music is open. Even when people don't like something, I like, getting different perspectives and different opinions on it. But like when people are just bitching that it exists, it's like, dude, you don't you have anything better to do with your life?
But I had one guy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you're mad that this song exists. I got a solution for you. I take the phone, I X out of it. There you go. It doesn't exist anymore.
That's right. Well, it's funny. This one guy, younger guy, apparently didn't, appreciate our music, and he goes, grow up. You're 50. And I was thinking to myself, like, what's he pissed about? Like, don't, like, seriously, like, you felt the need to say that on our social media, like, really?
Yeah.
Like, I almost went to his page and said some stuff, but it's like there's no winning that war.
Yeah, no, it's not a total waste of time. And you know what? To quote the great Lemmy Kilmister, if you think you're too old to rock and roll, you are. So
you are.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for such an awesome conversation. Most of all, thank you for this awesome new album that is most certainly needed at this time. I think it will be a future classic. Is there just anything else with Fifth Angel you'd like to promote in terms of upcoming shows, tours, what else we could be expecting, if you're allowed to say at this time, of course?
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the many fans across the world that have kept this band alive for this many years, especially our friends in Europe, especially Oliver at the Keep It True Festival, especially Yop over at Nuclear Blast, especially all the fans that you'll see them on our social media. We get a tremendous amount of love, and people that have stuck with us for almost 40 years, and we can't say enough, because without those people and without that support, we wouldn't be doing this. So that's the main thing I want to say is, look, we really appreciate you, and we will never take they're listening for granted. As an artist, the highest compliment is that someone would actually care about your art, and they would buy it, and they would listen to it, and they're spending time with it. That's such a huge honor to us, and we will never take that for granted.
And we'll never take your amazing music for granted, except for that guy who maybe made that 50 comment, but fuck him. But
I like the grow up.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy's probably... I'm not even going to make any judgment. But I want to thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Fifth Angel. Be sure to check out the brand new kick-ass album, When Angels Kill. It is an absolute riff and epic concept album, and riff-driven. You will enjoy it. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Alex.